welcome to Northwest City Politics. My name is Adam Schenck, and we broadcast from CCX Media in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. A little bit of introduction about our show. We're a volunteer-led production, and we once a month we bring local elected leaders and community leaders to our show to talk about community issues, and we do our best to, introduce public figures and talk about the issues of the day that cover, the CCX Media footprint, which is the Northwest City, the Northwest suburbs of Minneapolis. So, by way of talking about today's show, like a lot of people, I really followed the 2024 election quite closely, and all elections are local, as I'm sure we're all aware. And we had an election for the School District 281, or the Robbinsdale area schools, and there was an election, and we have three newly elected leaders. Two of them are re-elected, and we have one newly elected school board member who will start her term soon. And I wanted to, meet the newly elected board members, especially because the school board for District 281 has been quite newsworthy, and we can get into that as we move on to introductions. So, moving on, wanted to talk about our guests. So, Aviva, first of all, congratulations on your election. So, a little background for you. You have been Executive Director of Community Education for Minneapolis Public Schools since 2021. Mm-hmm. Very public-facing job. And prior to that, you also you were program director for community enrichment and engagement for Robbinsdale area schools from 2013 to 2020. And then you have leadership experience with local JCC, Jewish community centers.
That's cool.
What any other background that you'd like to share with the public, and what kind of motivated you to run for election?
Yeah, sure. So I live obviously in Robbinsdale schools. I have 3 kids, one who's graduated and 2 who are currently attending Robbinsdale schools. And I really wanted to contribute to my community and be a part of enriching education, not only for my kids, but for all the kids in our community. And that's really what motivated me to run. And I think too, you talked about all politics being local. I actually only won by 15 votes. So if you ever think your vote doesn't count, every vote counts.
Great, thanks so much, Aviva. And then we have Dr. Greta Evans-Becker, and I don't mean to age you, but I see that you've been involved as an educator since 1975.
True.
And you've been a District 281 school board member since 2020, and you were re-elected this cycle. What keeps you coming back to, serving on the school board, Greta?
Well, actually, I wasn't going to run this time around, but we got the new superintendent, and she's amazing, and has so much hope for the district and so much promise for the district. I really wanted to see it through with her another term, because I'm excited about having our new superintendent, Terry Stallo.
Yeah, Terry Stallo, is that how I should pronounce
like
her name?
Apollo.
Great, and I believe you did quite well with the election. I think you got the most votes.
Thank you for noticing.
Yeah. All right. Also, we have Helen Bassett. Helen, you've served on this school board for a while, since 2002. You've been reelected 6 times, and you've worked for state agencies as well, founded 3 nonprofits, and you've been a part of District 281 since 1983. So what keeps you coming back as well?
Well, you know, this last time I wasn't going to run either. I had actually decided the last campaign was my last campaign, and I threw my signs away. And then I was at the League of Women Voters Forum, and I told everybody, I'm like, what's the matter with you? Don't tell everybody you don't have any signs. But really, I decided, you mentioned that there was, you know, the district has been the subject of conversation, and I would not have felt good walking away with that situation. And I decided if the people said no, I could live with that. I couldn't live with leaving with all of that happening and feel good about it. And so, because this is part 2 of COVID, quite frankly, and we're not out of that yet. And so those were the reasons that kind of brought me back. And you know, we did select a new superintendent. So I'm happy about that. You know, but we also still have new directors we had at the time, and they're 4 in their first term right now. So, you know, that can be helpful. You know.
So just some kind of, let's talk about a little bit of table stakes. What is District 281 and the school board which it serves? So correct me if I'm wrong. So Robbinsdale area schools is comprised of Robbinsdale, New Hope, Crystal, part of Plymouth,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
What else?
Part of Golden Valley, part of Brooklyn Park, and part of Brooklyn Center.
Right.
Okay,
But
great.
all of Robbinsdale, all of New Hope, all of Crystal.
Yep.
So I don't actually have children, but the way the public school system works, correct me if I'm wrong, so children are not like required, but register to go to school. And is it like a state requirement that children have kind of like a school plan? Helen, maybe you could
Well,
comment
they're
on
required
that?
to go to school until they're 16. I mean, you know, but they, you know, of course, we can't make them and force them. But truancy is a big issue right now, and so since both Greta and Aviva have been involved in education for a long time as practitioners, you know, as a parent. My daughter went through, in fact, when 83, my son was in the old Robbinsdale High School, so back that far. And so maybe they may have some insights on that, but they're required to go, and so that's all I'll say about that, and I'll leave it to the ladies to talk about it further.
So, I mean, one thing about, you know, the state, technically the minimum requirements are that you go to school from 7, I believe, to 16. But we provide, you know, in most school districts do now, the pre-kindergarten, so 4-year-old preschool, all the way, obviously, through seniors in high school, and then beyond for kids with who need a little extra for special needs in our transitions program. That goes till 22. And I think, you know, one thing that, while kids have to go to school, they don't have to choose their local school district, right? And so one of the things that's really important to me is that people do choose Robbinsdale schools because it is a great experience. The kids, my kids, I mean, they have Spanish. One of them has a gold seal in Spanish because of Spanish immersion. They have so many great opportunities. One of them is super involved in sports, you know, and so all of those things are things that help parents want to choose to stay in our school district, because we realize there's competition, right? There's private schools, there's charter schools. You can open enroll in another district, but we want them to stay here. And so part of why I wanted to join the board and why I ran was to help make this a destination district.
Absolutely.
So children aren't required to go to kindergarten, but once they start school, they are expected to continue going to school. And we have neighborhood schools that families can be assigned to for their neighborhood, but also they, as in the district, they can asked to go, they have an option to ask to go to a different school in the district as a parent option. And then we not only have the neighborhood schools, but we have magnet schools also. You mentioned the Spanish immersion, there's the C school, and arts. And so there are many options for parents in the district for their elementary public education.
And, you know, and right now, you know, and that has been a draw. And so I think that provides a tension between all of the offerings that we have right now, including the magnets, and the need for us to really kind of narrow or zone in on how do we maintain those in the current fiscal environment. And so how do you select? How do you pare down? How do you concentrate?
Right.
So.
So that's a good segue. So I don't have children, but I do own a home in District 281.
Absolutely. That's right.
And to be fully honest, I'm a real bad kind of taxpayer because I don't know what my property taxes are, and I probably think they're not high enough.
Not high enough?
Look, can we clone you?
So, yeah, so I've lived in north part of New Hope, right near Meadow Lake Elementary, really maybe 2 blocks away, since 2015. So, so my understanding is I pay property taxes, and those taxes fund city services, which is kind of like city government, like city council, and then similarly, my property taxes fund District 281. Am I correct in that?
Yep, that's
Yes,
correct.
and the county also.
Yeah.
I think there's
And
county taxes in there.
But I would say, and this is why, you know, we recently had that, and
The
you guys
levy.
did the work on
The levy.
the referendum for the levy. You know, this is true, and you can look around the country, but even around our state, public education is chronically underfunded. There, you know, the federal government has never fulfilled their promise in funding special education services. We have lots of mandates that we have to provide for. We have kids with a lot of needs who come into school. We have homeless and highly mobile students. We have immigrant students who need English language services, and all of that continues to get more and more expensive. We have to pay our staff living and appropriate wages,
Yes.
and yet at the same time, our funding is stalls, and it doesn't increase at the pace of our expenses, and that's where you're seeing gaps in budgets across the state, including in Robbinsdale.
That's right.
But yes, your taxes fund our schools, and the important thing is, of course, just like, you know, we pay into Social Security, that you don't have kids, right? But as somebody said at a recent meeting I was at, said we're building a society here, right? And it benefits all of us, even if you don't have kids in schools, to pay those taxes, to have a
Yes.
educated workforce, to have kids who earn, you know, who go to school and then contribute to our society in a positive way. And so, so it's really important that people like you are bought into the school district and bought into our levies, which the referendum for the technology levy passed at like 75%,
Yes,
right?
with one of the highest in the state. I would say never vote against a referendum because you're just voting against your property values. Vote for it, because then
That's
you're
a good
voting
point.
for your future. You're supporting your own future, because these kids who are in school now, they are our future. They're the ones that will be taking care of us. So I would say always support the paying those taxes.
Yeah, that's what I hear when I was looking to buy a home with my lovely spouse. They look at the house and they look at the school district.
Yes.
That's
So
right.
I'm sure you're aware of the, you know, all, and
Property
you're kind of
value
like
will
the
depend on the
public
house.
officials that make that you know, perception of the area
The
happen,
school.
Yeah.
right?
In our staff, you know, because you know, in the survey that we did, and pretty much all districts do a survey to just get what's the tax tolerance level, how much are people willing to pay, and so all of us pretty much do if we're going to run a referendum, and so Morris Leatherman Group is kind of the gold bar that people use, and we did one back in the spring of '24. And that was, it came in at about 74%, a little higher actually, that people were willing to go back. And even when we have in the past had what we call the Community Connect, means our board members are out in the public with staff, at parades, at fairs, at all those kinds of things. And people just continually come up to when they come up to me and talk to me about it, you're seeing grandmothers and grandfathers, and they still are in the district. Their kids still go, or their grandchildren go, and they talk about the great experience or the great education that your children had. So, and they talk about the teachers or the principals or people that they had, and the people don't go anywhere. I mean, the staff there's some staff who've been there since I've been there, and they were there before I got there, and they're just starting to leave. They've been leaving right long, but you know, so it has that kind of history and that kind of grounding in community. And I think that that's to the credit of the programs and to the staff and the teachers that they have it. And when you're fortunate enough to have directors who don't mess it up.
Right.
You know, so.
Yeah, I actually have my neighbors right across the way. They have had they've got 4 kids. 3 of them have graduated from Cooper, and I think they're all, going to college.
Yeah, they're all doing
They've
well.
been they've been active in the community, and I actually went to see Harry Potter and
did
the Cursed Son, or whatever it was called.
Child.
Yeah, the Cursed Child, right? And then locally, I'm like I really like following the local news with the Sun Post, and then with CCX Media, of course. And I think Cooper and Armstrong are very active and successful in very many sports.
And even in the middle schools. I mean, they do a lot of productions all over the place.
Fine arts, sports, many things.
Yep. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I have to say that my kids, in addition to the languages, one did cello, like I said, one is sports,
yeah.
and then one is considering doing theater. It hasn't decided yet, but the point is really that there are so many different opportunities, and also in terms of, you talked about neighbors' kids going to college, but also we have great career technical
Yes, we do.
opportunities for
Yeah.
students as well. My oldest is actually wanting to be an electrician, and so right, he took electrical class at Armstrong, and so there's a lot of other opportunities beside that kind of one track for no matter who you are and what your interests are.
Yeah,
Great.
it's so important.
Those are all excellent things to learn about District 281. However, I did a little research, but not enough to be over-informed. So correct me if I'm wrong here. So my understanding is that school boards run on a policy governance model, and what that means is that the superintendent is hired, and then the school board is a kind of a
Policy.
helps create the policy with the superintendent that the superintendent then puts into action. So, but to me that sounds a little kind of conceptual. Can you tell me what the policy governance model means in practice?
I could.
Yeah, and I think each of us have our own thoughts about that. So.
Great.
Okay, so the school board is actually more like at 30,000 feet. We set the policy, we hire the superintendent, and then we have expectations for the superintendent to carry out those policies with the procedures and whatever's going on in the schools. The school board does not get engaged in the day-to-day activities because that would be administrative. So we don't solve the problems. If people come to us, we refer them to the superintendent, or we could talk to the superintendent, but we set the policies, and then the policies are what guide the district, and the superintendent has the strategic plan and the policies and procedures, and she runs the district with her cabinet and the learning leaders.
Yeah, so it sounds a little counterintuitive because I think, oh, the school board, like maybe there's a teacher that's doing great. Maybe there's a teacher that's struggling, needs some help. The school board is not going to insert itself into that
No.
kind of a situation, is it?
No, that is an administrative role. We only hire the superintendent and we evaluate the superintendent, and that is our only employee that we have direct supervision over.
But I think it's important to note that policy governance is a way of operating in a school district, and it's far and away, I think, probably I would say maybe 90% over the years that I've served and people I've met, about probably 90% of the districts function that way. Because, school districts, depending on their size, in greater Minnesota, you may have a superintendent and you may have board members who are doing multiple jobs. So in its purest sense, it's kind of the board is at the policy level, but the board also is responsible for connecting with the public and making sure that the vision that the public wants to see for the district is carried out. And so that's not a role you can just load off to the superintendent, because that's why you're elected or why have one. We could just hire people and have them do it. So the board's role is really to supervise and manage, and so you're not managing like in some cases because you're managing collectively as a board of 7. You're setting the guidelines, setting the marks, figuring out what the objectives are that you want to achieve. That takes cooperation among the board directors to figure out what are the things that are rising to the top that we want to monitor. When boards get in trouble is when they start, and people say, oh, you're just rubber stamping, you're rubber stamping. When boards get in trouble when they just abdicate their role. And, because I think there's a fine line. And also, there are other models, because empowered governance is also a model. It's not used in Minnesota, but there is a model like that. And there have been times over the years that I've served when myself and other directors, when we really felt like we need to, there's this line. And there have been times when the board collectively decided we needed to go below the line for certain things. And I know in a couple of different times when we actually were very engaged in working together to hire the folks who are going to do certain things in the district, and of course through the superintendent, but setting the pace. And so it's important to have a group of people who understand their job. So if you just by rote say policy governance, policy governance, policy governance, and you're not paying attention to how the ship is running, you're missing the mark. And so you can't be so enamored with that framework that you're not doing the work. And it takes time to figure that out. And so I think that is one of the challenges that many boards face, because we're in a state of constant churn because we have elections every 2 years.
Also, the board approves the budget. The board approves the budget, monitors it.
That sounds like an essential function, something very important. And what I've heard is that a budget is a moral statement. That's what I've heard.
That's true. Where you
And
put your money.
You're on top of it.
Where you put your money is the truth of what you do.
Where your values are.
Right. So Aviva, so the role of the school board is sort of takes the kind of like the will of the public, if you will, and the superintendent is one person who kind of like executes the vision.
Right.
Can't sort of like be the eyes and ears and do the job at the same time. So what are you looking forward to about the policy piece? To me it sounds like it's a lot of reading.
Well, good thing I like to read. I think that it's really important that we have such a great new superintendent. As a school board, we have we help with the direction, right? And then like it's a ship, right? but they're really doing the work of steering the ship. You know, I'm not an expert in 6th grade math curriculum,
Yes.
right? And that's why we have experts that work in the district to decide what's an appropriate curriculum. And it's not our job to get into that, even if we do know what a good 6th grade math curriculum is. I think for me, what I'm looking forward to is also helping the district as it's making decisions, financial decisions that we have to make, the hard decisions. You know, I was saying that schools are not funded well, and a lot of school districts use COVID money to help kind of cover. Schools have known for a long time that the funding isn't keeping up, and that at some point they're going to hit a crisis. But then we had COVID money, which helped kind of cover up that that deficit or make up for that deficit. And now that money is gone, right? And we can't kick the can down the road anymore. We have to make tough decisions, and those decisions are going to be made in concert with community voice and student voice, staff voice. But in the end, you know, it'll be our job to listen to the data and then help make the decisions and vote on what those big decisions are going to be to help us balance that budget. Because in the end, you know, by law, we have to be a balanced budget. So.
Oh, right. So you mentioned tell me how the budget gets created. So does the superintendent say, here's where I want to put the money, and then you look at that? Help me understand. Perhaps Greta, you could tell me.
Well, the CFO for the district plots out scenarios for the budget. And the main thing that we pay for as a school district is teachers. That's our people are our biggest expense as a district. And settling those contracts costs a lot of our money. And so the CFO has lots of columns and lines and ways to figure out where the money has been going, and then if we have said, well, we really want to have this program also, or we need to do this with the school, that gets put in there also, and the board reviews it, and then they do some adjusting, the board reviews it again, and we keep reviewing it starting in the beginning of the year, and finally at the end of June, we have to do the final approval for the board, for the budget for the following year. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, I mean, I think that's the big picture from the policy perspective. I do think that what is interesting is the way that different superintendents approach getting to the budget, and the selection of how they're going to make reductions in the places they be like, they need to make them. So I think what Greta has described is that's what it is. I mean, because they're looking at where we've been, how is where we are matching up to that, how is our expense line, meeting it, and and Aviva's right, because there's this shortfall because we don't have enough money. So if we're going to be making cuts, what we need to know are, what are the assumptions that the superintendent and the CFO are making that's underlying their recommendations? Because it's those assumptions that they make will guide the direction that they want to go. And then also the enrollment projections is a science. Because the enrollment projections, and there have been years, back 2016, 17, there have been a couple of years when the enrollment projections were wrong. And when the enrollment projections are wrong, that can leave you with like anywhere from a $300,000 to a $600,000 deficit.
Easily.
And so, easily. And so when you have that occur, then how do you make that up? Or you have a CFO who doesn't factor in all the lanes and steps, because there's the base amount of money that we're going to give to our teachers in labor negotiations. Then there are lanes and steps that by contract they're allowed to get. And if they get a certain amount of education and all of that, that all gets factored. It's important to have, and I mention this now because just as important as our superintendent is, the CFO that we have, I'm I feel like I'm getting to know her even. I haven't had time. I work. I haven't had time to really get to know the superintendent like I want to. But the things that I've seen, I like. But the CFO is the person who we really need to be on top of their game. And some of the things we found out recently is because we had a top-notch CFO who came in and kind of helped us identify some stuff. So, but we've had situations in the past that occurred. And I think, and we don't talk about those things because we want to talk about the good stuff in our district. We don't talk about problems. But I say that because it's important for people to understand. Historically, there have been some major things that have happened that we've had to overcome. And I think people look at the current situation and they want to say, well, it was this or it was that. It's cumulative. And there were a lot of things that have happened that we've had to overcome. And in addition to the shortfall in financing that Aviva talked about, because it's just not enough money. And so I think that it's the complexity, between the three of us, we've kind of hit it all.
Right. It sounds like a really stark kind of verdict if, in the ideal, you want to have really, help children grow, get educated,
Absolutely, yeah.
become functioning members of society, do great things. But if the enrollment is low or it's trending down, that means that the talented teachers
That's right.
can't get compensated the way they want, and the budget will not be a balanced. It sounds like quite a responsibility. Aviva, you're going to be a new board member.
Yeah, one advantage I have is because I work in education and I run a department, I have my own budget, is that I understand, while I don't know all the ins and outs of every funding stream, I do understand education funding, because you'll often have people say, well, you have a lot of money, why aren't you using it? Well, those are restricted funds, right? We have money that can only be used for long-term facility maintenance, right? And you need to have it there because you need some of it in case a roof leaks or
Pipe breaks.
a pipe breaks like it did just the other day.
Yes.
And so you need to have, you need that money. That's what that's for. You have compensatory money is to help kids who need extra support because of the situation that they come from, right? So you have all these different funding streams which are very targeted, and it makes it a much more complex puzzle. But I do have the advantage of coming in knowing a little bit more than maybe, say, someone who hasn't had any experience in education funding, because it's a very very complicated and specific specialty to understand all of that.
It is true.
Right, and Helen, you talked about kind of like budgets as having like being sort of like a cumulative thing, and then so just and then you mentioned a budget shortfall. Let's note that I didn't bring it up.
It was on your paper.
Oh, okay. So what Terry Stallo,
Terry
Dr. Stallo.
Dr.
Sta-
Stallo.
Yeah.
Stallo?
Like
Okay.
Apollo.
So Dr. Stallo wrote in the Sun Post on December 5th that of $17.4 million in approved reductions, only 3.2 million were realized, leaving us with a substantial budget. So kind of like, just as a citizen, I'm looking at that, and I think if we're going to cut $17.4 million out of District 281, that's going to, the effect to me sounds like, well, we had a class with 24. I'm speaking so I never have taught at the K-12 level, but I'm a former English
Oh, wonderful.
English professor at the college level. So I did that for more than 10 years. But I've worked in banking since 2015, however. But anyway, when I hear we have to cut $17.4 million, I think, if I was a teacher, I was teaching a class with 22 students. Now there's 36. There is a budget shortfall, and these things kind of like get sorted out over you know, multiple years, obviously. But so like, when I hear that big number, I'm kind of like afraid. So could you comment on that?
Well, first of all, I don't want people thinking that class sizes are going from 24 to 36. We have our class size ratios, and we do need to cut, and we always try to cut as far away from the classroom as we possibly can. Our superintendent has said this amount of money that we are short, you can't, and our CFO has to, this is more than you can just cut.
Yes.
And so it's also an opportunity to give Robbinsdale a new direction. And so there's going to be community meetings and groups of people working with the superintendent. What do we want Robbinsdale to look like? Where do we want to go from here? And we can reimagine Robbinsdale, reimagine Ardale, and work through that to figure out what are our priorities, what do we want education to look like, and where are we going to be spending our money. And so there may be cuts, there may be, we don't know, but it's an opportunity to have Robbinsdale be more future focused and be reinvented.
I would say too that one of the things that's really important to remember is you're talking about a $200 million budget, right? So while $17 million is a big number, and nobody, I mean, if you gave me $17 million, I would not say no to it, right? It's a lot of money, but at the same time, it is not, you know, when you look at the whole, right, it's less than 10% of the budget, right? So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing too, though, is that we had an interim superintendent for
Yes,
A year?
A year.
But almost a year and a half.
Yeah, a year and a half.
Yeah.
And that, you know, when you're interim, your job is to just keep things moving smoothly. And now we have somebody new who can really come in and look for those inefficiencies, look for new innovative ways to provide the services for our students. And not just say, well, this is the way we've always done it, not to say anybody has, but to say that, you know, how can we do this differently and more efficiently and more effectively? Student numbers are going down in large part because that's the demographics. People are having fewer kids. And so if that's the trend, how are we using our buildings? Are we using them as efficiently as possible? Do we have the right number of buildings? Bus routes, the way they're routed, how many routes we have, what's the walking zones? All of those things incrementally can add up to that 17 million, or at least a good chunk of it. And none of that would touch the classroom. So those are, not to say we're doing any of those things, to be very clear, but those are things to look at as you're evaluating. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity before we even get close to the classroom specific, you know, classroom sizes and things like that.
Yeah, and you work, you know, you hear the voice of the public. Again, like shutting schools down is not something that's been proposed, but you know, you might hear some negativity about what the school district is doing, and then you talk about possibly closing a school, any school, and like everyone comes out of the woodwork and says, "I love my school. Don't keep mine open." You know, it's amazing. Shut down somebody else's.
You know, I think that, you know, when we talked about the policy governance and the line and all of that, I think it's important to note that there are occasions, and I remember when we go, there are occasions when the school board is the one who actually has to close the school if one gets done. So the responsibility to figure out what the right sizing of a district is a joint responsibility. The person who carries it out and comes back with all the recommendations is doing the day-to-day down in the weeds to figure out all those questions, and the answers to those questions is the administration. But there is a role for the board in all of that. There was a time when across the Western Metro we had what we call Reimagine Minnesota. Many districts were involved in it. We did some discussions jointly with St. Louis Park and I think somebody else, you know, and all districts did it. And the Association for Metropolitan School Districts, you know, kind of was the parent of it. And that was a combination of parents, teachers, administrators, and board members. Everybody got in there because you listen. It's important for directors to be listening. It's important for directors to be engaged. they don't have to drive the bus, but they need to be on the bus. You know, I mean, seriously, they need to know what's going on. You know, and so I think that it's important for directors, for me, it always has been important to be involved in that mix. And our district has been involved in the past when we right-sized, and I've been, involved in 2 school closures. And I remember crying up on the dais over at Robbinsdale Middle School. I can remember crying over at Sonneson. Me and other directors crying, listening to parents and crying. You know, and one of the parents said, "Well, now you're feeling my pain." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm feeling your pain." You know, so I just want to say that because I think that you don't live in one place or the other. It's all connected. And that's what I have found over the years. It's all connected. To go down one path and think it's only one thing, you will miss a lot. And that's how I interpret it, and that's how I see it. But it's, it's important to let the superintendent do her job. You know, we're paying them they got the license.
Right.
To your point about closing schools and how people feel about their schools, when I worked in Robbinsdale, I worked with the alumni group, and we have amazing people who have lived in this community for multiple
years, 50 years,
generations,
yeah.
who are very dedicated, and change is hard no matter what, but people love their schools, and that's a great thing. And actually that, no matter what we wind up doing, is a really important thing to remember, is that people really love their schools and are really invested. People who graduated, will tell you, I graduated in 1956,
Yes,
you know, and for a long, long time, Robbinsdale Middle School had a sign that said, formerly Robbinsdale High School, right? Because people felt so strongly about their school. And so I think that's a really amazing, unique thing about Robbinsdale. And I just wanted to point that out because it makes it a really special place to be, because people who are in our schools now, their grandparents went to our schools.
That's right.
When I was campaigning, the one person was like, still upset that Robbinsdale High School
hear it all the time.
closed.
Yep.
Yes.
And that was before I
Years
even
ago.
moved to town in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still an
But they
issue.
still feel it.
Yeah.
They love their schools.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do too, and I didn't even go to school there. You know, I've been there for 22 years. I mean, you get hooked. you
Right.
know, So,
So we were talking about the budget, and I saw a phrase that sounded real scary. So it was SOD.
oh,
So when a school district has a budget deficit higher than 2.5%, there's a declaration of that's a statutory operating debt, or SOD, and the Minnesota Department of Education comes in and makes sure that the budget is headed in the right
Oversight.
direction. Could you help me understand that?
SOD, when we will go into SOD. And when we go into SOD, we have to have a plan to get us out of it, and a plan for our budget, and we submit that to the state, and the state will be monitoring us more closely than they would be monitoring school districts that are not in SOD, to ensure that we follow our plan and we do indeed get out of SOD. So we'll be monitored more closely by the state, and we just have to keep submitting plans to the state.
And some people think that means the state's taking over the
That is
school
not
budget
it.
and running the school. They are not. But they are providing more oversight and more close attention, but not,
They're not
they
taking
do
over
not
our
take over.
schools.
Yeah.
We should hope so. Okay. The superintendent also wrote this week in her Sun Post column, there was an error in the implementation of the budget process. When it came to the implementation of the budget, chiefly allocating staff members to each school, approximately $20 million in compensatory funding was effectively counted twice. It was included in our total revenues for the 2024-25 school year during our budget planning phase, and then counted again to fill our staffing for this school year.
Yes.
So I mentioned it before, but that really sounds kind of scary. And then, like I said, I'm not much for a citizen. Like my wife tells me what the taxes are, and she pays them.
Good. Nice.
So just a bit, but anyway. So that sounds like like someone thought that $20 million was in two places. Now we're short $20 million, and you know, people in the community probably think, who did this? When did they find out about it? Whoever made this error needs to be held to account. And you know, I see that Superintendent
Stallo.
Apollo, remember?
Apollo, yes. Superintendent Stallo is new. So tell me about the kind of like public feedback you've been getting about this, because it sounds like a real egg on your face moment.
It is, and I think maybe because, you know, Aviva's just coming, maybe that's one that we can talk about, and certainly want to hear what your thoughts are about it. But I guess the fact that I'm happy that with the fact that we have a superintendent and a CFO who didn't create the situation. So they can come in without being defensive, and they can say, here's where we are, here's what I understand about it, and they're going to go dig into it and try to find out. That's their job to do that. At the same time, the public trust that the board holds is real. And so I've sent a note, because one of the things we do in policy governance is we try to send our public messages through the chair. And so I have asked that we can have a conversation about this. I've sent that note, and so we'll see what happens. We need to have a conversation about it. There is no way in the world a board should, in my opinion, not have a conversation about or acknowledge the fact that we have this. And moreover, I believe that also the board, you asked the question about what's the board's role in budgeting a few minutes ago. I think it's incumbent upon the board to kind of take a look at the processes. I mean, how do we interact with the budget process? And I think we have a finance advisory council that we've had for years. I think it's getting a reboot. Some advice from them about maybe coming together and talking about it. There are some things that we can do, and in my opinion, we should do. And so I'm, work with my colleagues. I'm not trying to run out front. I'm not trying to run to the side. I'm just being very honest about what I believe, and I've, communicated that. I think we need to have that conversation because, if I was sitting at home and I was on the board, I'd be wondering, what's the board doing? That's a legitimate question, because we have the public trust. And so $20 million is nothing to sneeze at. Now, one of the things that we'll have to see, because with regard to what, CFO's Hoheisel and through the superintendent, what it is that will be recommended. One of the things that you'll see it, because we just had a meeting last night, and we talked about, some money stuff, not deeply, but a little bit. And one of the questions that I asked her is of her familiarity with a process where you actually have a system, I'll say an audited system, but a control system over the positions. And I know we did that at WEMAP. We instituted that, and then if for every position that gets hired, fired, whatever happens to them, there's a tracking of that. There's no way you can hire the person twice. So, and if you say, you know what I'm saying? So there are some systems that we can put in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. If that's the system, I don't know. I'm not a CFO, but she was familiar with it when I mentioned it. And I've mentioned it before, about a year ago. At the time, I didn't, I just kind of mentioned it in passing because I'm pretty easy. People don't think it, but I'm kind of easygoing, But because I really am. But but the fact is that it's time to really be specific and ask, can we do that? And then people can say yes or no, because this is the will of the whole board. But the board needs to step up and get involved and get engaged, at the appropriate level. And so, and which will be several steps removed, because at the end of the day, when we decide what kind of things we need to do to right-size the district, to maintain and preserve programs, to do all of those kinds of things, we have to have our fingers on the pulse and understand what we're doing. And that's a joint responsibility between the superintendent and ourselves, because she's going to need us to be out there being the cheerleaders and the advocates. And if we are just saying, okay, if we don't know what we're doing and we don't know why we're doing it, then that's not okay, in my opinion.
Dr. Greta, it seemed like you wanted to comment.
Well, you were mentioning both of us. Can you just rephrase your question a little bit, because that was a lot of answer.
We often have them. Everybody.
What I was actually thinking, Greta, was you've been in education for decades. I got to think
Plural.
this is the first time that something like this has happened.
It's the first time that I am familiar with it happening. The board voted on a $203 million budget last spring, and knowing that $17 million of cuts would be made, people were notified that their positions were cut. But then people, thinking that we still had the compensatory funds, used what they thought were those funds and rehired positions and restaffed their buildings. And that was that's how the money got used twice, because the compensatory was in the 203, and then it was used, as you said, the superintendent said. And so it was not a fault of the board, and we're not blaming or faulting anyone else. What we're trying to do is look forward. And if we focus on why, who did who, it doesn't help us getting it solved. We know that it happened. We know why it happened, because of the accounting error. And so now we need to, let's get everything, all our ducks in a row. Let's get these committees, community people together, figure out solutions. Focus on going forward.
Excellent. Aviva, it's a heady time to be joining the board, is it not?
It is, but I think that it's an exciting time. I mean, with these kinds of issues comes real opportunity, like we were saying before, and I'm excited for those opportunities. Education has remained pretty much the same for 100, 150 years, right? And we know so much more about how kids learn, about what makes for good education, that we need to invest in kids younger, to build their brains and to get them ready to learn, so that when they come to kindergarten they're ready to learn. We know so much more, but we haven't made changes, and this gives us the opportunity to try to make some of those changes, right? To invest in the things that really work, and to let go of those that don't. And so I'm actually really excited about it. I mean, nobody's excited about losing a lot of missing a lot of money, but I'm excited about the opportunities that it affords us.
The possibilities. We know how the brain learns how to read. We know a lot, and so the possibilities out there are pretty much endless.
There, but I think the selection of those possibilities is where the rubber meets the road, because you started out talking about your taxes. And talking about the different demands for the tax dollar. In fact, the League of Women Voters over in our neck of the woods actually have been doing a little bit of a mini study on school finance. And we're not done, and we're just kind of moving along in it. And because I think one of the things that in the center of that whole discussion is sustainability.
And it pushes innovation, right? I mean, innovation comes out of these kinds of situations, right? Out of these challenges. And that is a really exciting thing. And also, I mean, last night we had a presentation from the Youth Council. We have amazing assets in our students, and they can help us innovate. They can tell us what they need, and then we can help make sure it happens.
They're brilliant.
Exactly. And you shouldn't discount a 5-year-old. They can tell you, they know exactly what is working for them in the classroom, what's not. And so we really also have that really great, rich resource of our amazing students.
Yeah, as a former educator, something that's a really good maxim is to say, what was it? Talking is not teaching. Talking is not teaching. So if I'm the teacher and I'm in front of a group and I'm very entertaining and I'm very charismatic, not saying that I'm that, obviously, but you know, the point is for, you know, the student to feel empowered, you know? So, you know, that's what I understand, like, student-centered teaching to be about. And, you know, that sounds like a form of the innovation that Aviva you were referring to. Yep. So we're running a little low on time. So I wanted to, you know, take a little step back and talk about kind of trends in education. So I've heard like enrollment numbers are really dipping in the city schools,
In many schools.
Minneapolis and St. Paul. What are the trends for District 281? Is it as stark as you see it there?
Our enrollment is also trending downward. Like you said, it's the birth rate. It's lots of parent options. I mean, there are charter schools, private schools, open enrollment out, and people open enroll into our district also. And so parents have more options than they used to, and they're having less kids.
That's right.
Yeah, and some of it too is just trends of where people live and the cycles of different communities, right? So you have communities, you see, a lot of people move in with young kids or when they're about to have kids. Those communities age, people don't move out for decades and decades.
They age
It
in
takes a
place.
long time to turn it over and start having young families in those homes again. And so we're just in a dip in that cycle. But yeah, the numbers are just going down. That's just the reality of the demographics of our country. Our birth rates are lower.
The home I enjoy living in, I bought it from an original owner who had built the home and lived there since 1955 to 2015.
Yep,
wow.
exactly. That's
Probably with several kids.
yeah.
Yep. It's very out.
Yep. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. You can see the neighborhoods start to turn over, but it takes time.
Right.
Well, so we have about 30 seconds left. Tell me something great in a really quick comment that you've seen happen in the district and what makes you excited to be part of the school board. Let's quick round, 10-second answers.
Go ahead.
No, you can't.
Last night at the school board meeting, Armstrong kids with a NASA hunch, one of 4 high schools in the nation working on solving problems with NASA. Amazing.
Well, I mean, I'm biased, but I think we also have amazing community ed programs that we haven't talked about, but
Yes,
we
we
teach
do.
adults who the system may have failed to begin with, or English language learning. We've got preschool, early childhood, family education. We've got enrichment for youth and adults, and all of that helps support the learning that goes on in schools.
Absolutely.
And we're so low on time.
Yeah.
So I'm your guest host of Northwest City Politics, Adam Schenck. We've really had a great conversation. So thankful to have you. Aviva Hillenbrand, Dr. Greta Evans-Becker, and Helen Bassett. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
you're too
This is a
kind.
great job.
You're
you
too
did.
kind.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.